Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Professor Shushmita Basu Majumdar from the University of Calcutta. Today, under Indian culture, we will be taking up the subject Indian numismatics, and in this, we will be taking up the module Post-Mauryan coins and currency systems. Now, post-Mauryan is a phase by which we understand the decline of the Mauryan power, and the objectives of learning under this course will be a broad overview of the numismatic scenario during this phase, that is post-Mauryan. And the topics which we will be actually covering are coins issued by the local dynasties or monarchical powers, the city issues, coins issued by the Ganasanghas, coins of Deccan, that is like coins of Satavahanas, Shakas, and coins of far south, coins issued by the foreign rulers in India, and Roman coins found in India. So we will be having a broad overview of the subject under this post-Mauryan coins and currency systems. By post-Mauryan, we mean a time phase which is from 2nd century BCE to 3rd century CE. The term post-Mauryan directly indicates a phase after the decline of a major power, that is the Mauryas, who had control over a large part of the Indian subcontinent from Afghanistan to Karnataka. The Mauryans had introduced a common coinage, that is 5-symbol punchmark coin, and this brought about a uniform currency pattern all over the subcontinent, leaving aside the far south. With the decline of this large empire, the numismatic scenario underwent many changes of far-reaching consequence. There was a demand of coins, but the supply was not adequate. Hence, in some regions, punchmark coins were minted locally, and also imitations of such coins were made. At times we find that the punchmark coins, which should be actually minted by using the archaic multiple die striking technique, were minted by using casting technique. That is, they were minted in molds, which actually indicates that they were kind of forgeries or they were imitated just to meet the demand of the time. The major markers of post-Mauryan economy are as follows. Particularly for North India and the northwestern part of the subcontinent, we have to look at the local powers who made their presence felt by issuing their coinages. Monarchical powers also issued dynastic coins. So for monarchical powers, we have the appellation dynastic issues. Then we also find the cities which were issuing their respective coinages. So in these coins, we have the names of the cities. So we call them city issues. And then we have the coins of the Ganasanghas, like the Yodhyas, the Kunindas, and so on. So they also issued their own coinages. Among the foreign coins, we have the foreign invasions by the Bactrian Greeks. So the Bactrian Greeks, when they came to India, they were known as the Indo-Greek rulers. And these Indo-Greek rulers started a new form of currency with the introduction of the die striking technique in Indian subcontinent. And after the Indo-Greeks, we find the Indo-Parthians, the Indo-Scythians, and all the foreign powers issuing coinages mainly in silver and in copper in the northwestern part of the subcontinent. And along with this, we also find influx of Roman coins mainly used as bullion in peninsular south. Availability of Roman gold, silver, and copper coins indicate India's trade with the Roman Empire. Now let us come to peninsular south. In peninsular south, particularly in the upper part, that is Deccan, we find the presence of several localities, and these localities were tied to a locality nuclei. So each of the localities were issuing their own coinages, and out of these localities we find the emergence of the Satavahanas. So the Satavahanas had a different kind of a polity altogether, and they had minted two types of coins. So these are not types, but their coins can be broadly divided into two different categories. One is the locality type of coins, which were actually regio-specific, and the other variety is the universal type, and this universal is actually those which are found in the Pan-Deccan. So this is a typical type which we will do later on, or which we'll take up later on. In the western part of the coastal Gujarat and Kathiawar region, we find the western Kshatraps. So the western Kshatrapas are basically the Shahratas and followed by the Kardamakas. They issued coins contemporary with the Satavahanas in the western region. In far south, we have clan-based polities, and among the chieftaincies, we have the major powers, Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. So all these powers also started issuing coin during this particular phase, and along with the Cholas, Cheras and the Pandyas, we also find the Malayamans issuing coinages, particularly in this particular phase. As far as the economy was concerned, it was based on production and plunder. Thus, barter and redistributions were the trend. Rise of indigenous powers, trading organizations, foreign invasions, foreigners settling in the subcontinent, and trade with Roman Empire and other distant realms and regions finally made a major impact on the coinage, trade, and economy of post-Mauryan India. Now let us see the coins or the numismatic references and also the coin molds which have been found from excavated contexts. Here is a coin mold, particularly in terracotta, which has been found from Dhulikatta, which was used for counterfeiting Panchmark coins. As I have already explained that the Mauryans were using the Panchmark coins, that is the 5-symbol Panchmark coins, and these were imitated by using the casting technique. So this mold indicates that the Panchmark coins of the Mauryans were imitated by minting them in casting molds. So this shows that the demand and the supply were not matching, and that is why the Panchmarks were produced locally. Now, coins of the monarchical powers and dynasties, as I had already mentioned, that several dynasties in North India came up, and these rulers were using the titles or name endings like Mitra, Datta, Ghosha and Sena. So these powers were minting the coins which had the names of the rulers and also the dynastic names. Such dynasties mainly bear the name endings or the titles Mitra, Datta, Ghosha and Sena, as I have already mentioned. For example, in Ayodhya, we find the coins of the rulers like Kumudasena, Ajavarman, Sanghamitra, Vijayamitra, Satyamitra, and so on. The Panchal coins of the 2nd century BC also bear the names of the rulers like Agnimitra, Bhumimitra, Falgunimitra, and so on. On the Panchal coins, you find 3 symbols on the top, and below the 3 symbols, you have the name of the ruler in Brahmi characters reading like Agimitasa or Bhumimitasa. Here is a coin of Bhumimitra, and on the reverse you have the figure of Bhumimitra. So on the coins of Agnimitra, you'll have the figure of Agimita, that is Agnimitra. On the coins of Falgunimitra, you'll have the figure of Falgunimitra. So it is in Prakrit and it reads Phaguni Mitasa. For Agnimitra, it will read Agi Mitasa. So the legend is in Prakrit and the characters are Brahmi. Now let us come to the city issues. These were the coins which were minted in particular cities And we know this because they bear the name of the cities in Prakrit. And these cities were like Ujjaini, Kosambi, and Tripuri, Mahishmati. So in the coins of Tripuri, you will find the legend Tipuri. In the coins of Ujjaini, you will find the name in Prakrit as Ojini. So these can be attributed to the cities. The question which arises is, who were minting these city issues? Probably the traders in the cities minted these coins, and that is why they bear the name of the cities instead of the name of the rulers or issuing authorities. Now, you find these coins only in base metal and not in higher valuation currency, which means that they were used for day-to-day transaction. Now let us go to the coins of the Ganasanghas. Ganasangha is a kind of a polity, and you find the term Gana being used on most of these, like Yodheya Ganasya Jaya. When you find this on the coins of the Yodheyas, we know that they have a Ganasangha kind of a polity. And on these coins, at times, you also find the name of the cities. Like for the Yodheyas, you have the name of Bahudhanyaka. So it means that the Yodheyas issued this particular type of coin from the city of Bahudhanyaka. And the coins of the Ganasanghas were mainly influenced by the Indo-Greek coinage. They were also minted in silver apart from copper. The legends are inscribed in both Kharoshti and Brahmi on either sides. These have been found from Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, West Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. Among these issues, we may mention the Ganasanghas like Vrishnis, Audumbaras, Bemakis, Kunindas, etc. So, some of the issues also bear the term Janapada along with the name of the Ganasanghas like the Rajanya. So, Rajanya Janapadasa or Sibi, Trigarta, etc. Besides copper and silver, the Kunindas also issued coins in heightened bronze. So heightened bronze is a kind of an issue where you have the quantity of tin which is around 6 to 22 gram. Heightened bronze coins will have tin in the coins which will amount to around 16 to 22%. So the Kunindas were issuing coins with high tin. Now let us see the Kuninda coins as an example. This is a Kuninda coin which is minted in silver, and you can read in Brahmi on one side the legend Ragyah Kunidasa Amoghabhutisa Maharajasa, and the same thing you can read in Kharoshti characters on the reverse. So on one side you have the figure of a stag, and beside that you have the figure of a female deity, and the circular region reads the same, Ragya Kunidasa Amoghabhutisa, and on the reverse you have the Kharoshti legend, and you have few symbols like there is a multiple hills, there is a box over which you have parasol and trees, and a Jayadhwaja kind of a symbol along with swastika and Nandipada. But the Kuninda coins were also minted in copper. So the copper coins of the Kunindas had the similar legend, but here you can see the copper coins do not have any Kharoshti legend. They only have Brahmi legend on the obverse, and on the reverse they have a dotted border. So this shows us clearly that only the silver coins were minted for the people who can read Kharoshti. So in the Kuninda region, the local people did not read Kharoshti. So the use of Kharoshti was only for the Indo-Greeks, and the weight of the silver coins of the Kunindas is half the dram, which means it's actually hemidram, the half of the coins of the Indo-Greek weight standard. So the transaction was with the Indo-Greeks, and As far as the Hittite bronze coins are concerned, you can see the Hittite bronze coins. They also had on one side the same obverse device as of the silver coins and the legend in Brahmi, and on the reverse you have the same devices as in the silver coins, and the Kharoshti legend is there. So it means that the Hittite bronze coins were actually minted for the advertisement purpose that they can also make such kind of metals. So it's their metallurgical knowledge which they were trying to communicate to the Indo-Greeks. So these probably serve the purpose of advertisement tokens. Now let us move to the typological progression of the Kuninda coins. When you look at the coins, you find that the device is gradually degenerating. In this slide, you can see how the coin device is going through a phase of evolution. This phase of evolution can be termed as typological progression, and this helps us in arranging the coins in chronological order. Gradually, the device lost its importance and even the meaning which was portrayed. Now let us move to the topic of dynastic cum city issues. There are certain coins, as I have already mentioned, issued by the Gana Sanghas, which had the name of the Gana Sangha, that is the Yodheyas, and along with that it also had the name of the city, that is Bahudhanyaka. Similarly, there are coins which have the name of the ruler, that is, it's a dynastic coin, and along with that there is an indication of the city. It does not name the city, but it has a particular symbol which mentions that it came from a particular city. For such coins, we can look at the coins of Malhar. Malhar is a small village near Bilaspur in Chhattisgarh, and here we find coins being issued, that is the local coins issued continuously from 1st century BCE to 3rd 4th century CE, that is particularly the post-Mauryan phase. And on these coins we find the names of the rulers, that is, these were particularly dynastic coins. But we get these coins from 4 different dynasties, but the symbol on the coin did not change, which means that the symbol stood for the identity of the place, that is Malhar. That is why numismatists have termed it as Malhar symbol on the coins. So these can be called dynastic cum city issues. You can see that there are several rulers who had been issuing coins. In the early phase, you get Silalusiri, Achadasiri, Dharmabhadra. Then the dynasty changes to Maghas of Koshala. Then again you have another phase where you have Silalusiri, that is Shivasri Silaluka, Bhalika issuing coins. And the final phase is the elephant deity type coins. Let us now see the coins. From Malhar, you have this particular Panchmark coin, and on this Panchmark coin, you can see the Malhar symbol punched clearly, which actually means that it is a symbol denoting the identity of the place. Then you have the coins of Magashri, and here the Malhar symbol has actually been put in red. So you marked in red. You can see the Malhar symbol on all these coins. Now, this is another coin issued by Shivasri Silalukasa. Here also you can find this particular Malhar symbol on the coin. It's a copper coin. It was attributed to the Satavahana ruler Apilaka, but now it has been identified as a coin of ruler Shivasri Silaluka, who belonged to the Malhar region, as the Malhar symbol is punched on it. In the final phase, as I had mentioned, the elephant deity type coins. These coins have stylized elephant on one side and the deity on the reverse. These coins do not have Malhar symbol towards the end, which means that the city no more actually was the identity for these coins. So it had spread to a larger area of South Koshala. Now let us move from here to the foreign coins, that is the coins issued by the Indo-Greeks. So in this phase we find from around 150 BCE, the Indo-Greeks started invading the northwestern part of the subcontinent, and they settled here. and you find several coins being issued by these Indo-Greek rulers. Out of these Indo-Greek rulers, you find 5 to 6 references of rulers in the text, that is the literary evidences. But when you look at the coins, you find more than 40 rulers issuing coins. Here you have a coin of Agathocles and Demetrius displayed on the slide. And on the coin of Agathocles, you can see on one side you have Vasudeva and on the other side you have Sankarsana. So it's Balaram and Krishna depicted on the coin of Agathocles. So a different kind of an iconography was also upcoming. And after the Indo-Greeks, you have the Kushans in this region of northwestern part of the subcontinent. If you want to know more about Indo-Greeks and Kushan, you have to go to the modules where elaborate information has been given on the Kushans and the Indo-Greeks, and you can learn more about it. About the Kushans, as we know, that they were a Central Asian tribe, and from the Chinese Central Asia, this nomadic tribe had traveled all the way to the northwestern part of the subcontinent, and they have carved out an empire for themselves, which started from Bactria, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and spread up to Mathura during its zenith. And the Kushanas issued copper coins, gold coins, and these copper coins, which were issued by Kujalakatphises, one of the earliest rulers of this dynasty, were imitations of different types of coins which were circulating in the northwestern part of the subcontinent. And here you can see a coin of Kujalakatphises where he has imitated the Roman coins of Augustus. So the coins of Augustus were actually in silver and in gold, but Kujalakatphises had imitated them in copper, and the other coin belongs to Vimakatphises, and Vimakatphises' coin is in gold. The Kushan coinage became a very important part of the currency system and pattern during this time, and the Kushan introduced several new things in the coinage tradition. Rather, Vimakatphises revolutionized the whole currency pattern by introducing gold currency in India. Kushan copper coins also had a very good quality of copper in it. Now from the Kushans, let us move to the region of Deccan. In Deccan, you have the Satavahanas and the Western Kshatrapas as the two major powers. But there is a distinct pre-Satavahana phase in Deccan where you find several powers or local powers issuing coinages, and on their coins we find the titles like Mahasenapati, Maharathi, Mahatalvar, Mahagamika, Sevaka, and so on. The Satavahanas emerged out of these because they were also Maharathis, and from the Maharathi status they actually emerged as a major power. And to let you know that the Maharathis, that is the Rathikas and the Bhojakas, had already been mentioned in the Ashokan inscriptions, and later on the appellation Maha was added to their status, which shows an elevated status of the Rathikas, that is Maharathika, and the Bhojakas became Mahabhojakas during this phase. So here we find that the Satavahanas actually imitated the coin types which were circulating in these regions or in these localities. So in Vidisha you find the Satavahanas imitating the coins of Vidisha, in Tripuri you find Satavahanas imitating the coins of Tripuri. So these coins were actually regio-specific coins, and when you come to Vidarbha you have a local punch-marked variety of Vidarbha where they imitated this punch-mark variety, which we will be showing later on. This shows that the Satavahana rulers occupied these localities. They issued coins imitating the local issues in these regions. Satavahana coins were thus regio-specific in character, each region having its own type, and the coins of the region circulated within them, like Nasik, Nevasa, Junnar, Kotlingala. So these were all localities. Apart from these regio-specific issues, the Satavahanas also issued a particular type which is known as the universal type, which was actually for the whole region of Deccan. So it's a pan-Deccan variety where you have on the obverse the elephant and the name of the ruler. And on the reverse you have the symbols or the royal emblem of the Satavahanas, that is the Ujjain symbol. Here you can see the universal or the pan-Deccan coinage of the Satavahana Shrimukha Satakarni. Shrimukha is one of the earliest rulers of the Satavahana family. Coin of Satakarni with Ujjain symbol on the reverse. This is also a universal variety, as you can see elephant on the obverse and Ujjain symbol on the reverse. Local coins of Vidisha, which were imitated by the Satavahanas, is also a very interesting pattern. Here you can see both the coins displayed on your screen. On your left is the coin of the local ruler of Vidisha, and on your right you have the Satavahana coinage. So it's a typical imitation of the Vidisha coinage by the Satavahanas. So this is how the coinage was regio-specific. Similarly, when you come to Tripuri, you have this variety where the Satavahanas imitated the coins of Tripuri. In Patan, they had this other variety, which you can see a typical kind of a tree in railing with large leaves. And then when you come to the region of Vidarbha, you have the Panchmark coins, but they removed one of the punches, and in this place they had placed the name of the ruler. So this is a Vidisha variety. So apart from the regio-specific coins and the universal coins, you have a few very typical kind of Satavahana coinages which were actually unique. And you have to mention the ship type coins of the Satavahanas. They issued a kind of coinage where you can see a large ship and several other watercrafts in the backdrop. So this gives you kind of a seascape where the large ship was actually embarked in the sea and the small boats were flying towards the large ship. So this coin is actually found from the eastern coast. The Satavahanas were active in the western coast, but it's very interesting that the ship type coin is actually found from the eastern coast. Other than this, the coins of the Satavahanas from Junnar depict a very interesting kind of a lion. So it's called a Junnar lion variety. This is again a regio-specific coin, and on the reverse you have the normal Ujjain symbol. It is very interesting to note that the Junnar type coins were also issued by the Shakas, to which I'll come a little later. But now let us move to the portrait type coins of the Satavahanas. So the Satavahana rulers actually were influenced by the Western Kshatrapa coinage, particularly Shahrata coinage, and they also thought of issuing the portrait varieties. But they did not imitate the portraits of the Western Kshatrapas. Rather, the portraits found on the Satavahana coins are very genuine kind of portraits. And here you can see the coin of Vashishti Putra Pulumavi. So on the obverse you have the portrait of the ruler, and on the reverse again you have the Ujjain symbol and the legend in Brahmi characters. Similarly, you can see the coin of Yagyashi Satakarni, where you have the portrait of Yagyashi Satakarni, and on the reverse you have the symbols along with Ujjain symbol. So what is very interesting is that this portrait type of coins were issued after the reign of Gautamiputra Satakarni. Up to the reign of Gautamiputra Satakarni, up to the reign of Gautamiputra Satakarni, we do not find any portrait type of coins issued by the Satavahanas. So these were only issued after Gautamiputra Satakarni with the beginning of the reign of Vashishtiputra Pulumavi. More than 6 rulers had issued portrait type coins among the Satavahanas. Now from the portrait type coins, let us move to the excavated context where we find the coins of the Hasti dynasty from Veerapuram excavation. And these coins were actually followed by the coins of Vashishtiputra Pulumavi, which shows that Vashishtiputra Pulumavi's reign should come after the Hastis. Now let us move to the Junnar type coins, as I had mentioned, that the coins of Junnar were actually regio-specific coins issued by the Satavahanas and also by the Shakas. So we find that it was a regional variety which once the Shakas were issuing, so you can see the thunderbolt and the arrow and the bow on the reverse, and on the obverse you have the junior lion type, and on the Satavahana coins on the reverse you find the Ujjain symbol. So this actually shows how localities were being brought under the Satavahana realm, and at other times the locality chief shifted his allegiance towards the Shakas. So this reflects a kind of a struggle between the Satavahanas and the Shakas. Let us see the points of the Western Kshatrapas and then we will come back to the issue of the Shaka-Satavahana struggle. The Western Kshatrapas, that is, the rulers who were issuing coinage in the western territory of Gujarat and Kathiawar. Among them we have two major dynasties, the Shaharatas followed by the Kardamakas. The Shaharatas had three main rulers, the Abhiraka, Bhumaka and then Nahapana. Here is a coin of Shaharata Nahapana where you find the portrait of Nahapana on one side, that is on the obverse, and on the reverse you have the symbols, that is bow and arrow and thunderbolt. The coins of the Shakas and the Satavahanas bear evidence of the struggle between the two dynasties. Satavahanas restruck some Shaka coins and so did the Shakas. The Jogalthembe hoard consists of the coins of Nahapana being restruck by the Satavahana king Gautamiputra Satakarni. So a large hoard was discovered from Jogalthembe which had more than 13,000 coins, and from these we find more than 9,000 coins restruck by Gautamiputra Satakarni. So restriking was done in such a manner that you can see the portrait of the Shakas, and on that you have the Satavahana symbols. So this clearly depicts that some kind of a struggle or a conflict was going on between the Shakas and the Satavahanas. There are, however, many more evidences to show the Shaka-Satavahana conflict, and you can see the module on Satavahanas and the Shakas to learn more about this. After the Shaharatas, we have the Kardamaka family. On the coins of the Western Kshatrapas, that is the Kardamaka family, which succeeded the Shaharatas, you find the similar portrait on the obverse, and on the reverse there is a change of the royal symbol. So you no more find the similar symbol which you found on the Shaharata coinage, and in the center now you can see that the royal symbol has changed, and it's a three-peaked hill with a floral symbol and a line, undulating line below that. So this is the not the Shaharata coinage but the Kardamaka coinage. Now from here let us move to far south. By far south we mean the territory which was below Deccan, and here we have three major powers, the Cholas, Cheras and the Pandyas. These were all clan-based polities or chieftaincies, and they have their presence in the Sangam literature throughout, and the economy of these powers was based on plunder and production. So here you find that there was a constant struggle, or there was a constant conflict between the powers, and the Cholas, the Cheras and the Pandyas issued coinages in base metal. And along with the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas, you have another power, that is the Malayamans. The Malayaman chiefs were a branch of the Cheras who issued coins separately and had a horse as their reverse motive. And on the obverse of the Malayaman coins, we find the depiction of three hills and a river originating from this hill, which gives the impression of a landscape being portrayed on the coins. The Chola coins have a tiger as the royal emblem on the reverse. The Pandya coins had a stylized fish, and the Cheras had bow and arrow. Now let us see the coins. The Chera coins had bow and arrow on the reverse, which is their royal emblem. The Chola coins had a tiger as their royal emblem, and the Pandyas had a stylized fish as their royal emblem. So on the Malayaman coins, you find the horse on one side, and on the other side, you have a kind of a landscape being portrayed where you have the hills and a river flowing. And this depicts a kind of a road or a river, which might be the earliest portrayal of a landscape on the coins. Besides this, we also have some chiefs issuing portrait type coins. These were very few in number, and the Roman coins probably influenced them, and that is why we find some of these chiefs like Irumpurai, we have Kutatuvan, who were issuing portrait type coins from this far south, the region of far south. But this region of far south had experienced trade, that is, trade with the Roman Empire, and there was influx of large amount of gold coins of the Romans and silver and copper coins. So on the Roman coin, here you can see a slash mark on the ruler's face, and these Roman coins have been found throughout the peninsula south. The Roman coins were mainly brought as bullion, and this is due to the trade with the Roman world. The Roman silver coins were known as denarius, the Roman gold coins were known as aurae, and later thin gold coins were called solidi. Copper coins of the Romans were also issued by the Byzantines mainly, and they also came to this region. There are three distinct phases of influx of coins. In this initial phase, it was the silver coins, then followed by the gold coins, and finally the copper coins along with the gold solides. So, we find that the Roman coins actually influence the coinage pattern of this region, and even in the North India, we find the Roman coins influencing the Kushan coins. Now finally towards the end, let us discuss the non-metallic coinages or the non-metallic pieces which also circulated as currencies. Along with the coins, we also find the cowries or the kapardakas, the cowrie shells circulating as medium of exchange, and these were mainly brought from Maldive Islands, and in Bengal region we find that cowries had become a regular currency. When Fashion came to this region, Fashion mentions that Madhya Desha was using cowries as currencies. What is very interesting is that in far south, you find particularly from Karur region and Coimbatore that certain coins have been found which are like cowrie shells, and they have the teeth like cowrie shells, and they have also been stamped. So these were also accepted as currencies. But it is very strange that why they were minted in silver. So these were actually silver globules. This also shows that cowries were actually not used in the southern part of the peninsular south, because cowries were easily available nearby Maldive Islands. So cowries were available in the Maldive Islands, and that is why they could easily bring them, and they were not used as regular currency. So they were minted in silver as silver globules. Let us summarize what we have learned in this module of postmodern coins and currency system. In spite of the absence of a paramount power and the proliferation of local and regional powers, the monetary scenario does not suggest any economic crisis or instability in the subcontinent. Rather, there is a profusion of metal money in this phase. In terms of variety and sheer number of coins issued in this phase, shows a very high degree of monetization and a complex economy not experienced in previous times. Rise of indigenous powers, trading organizations, foreign invasions, foreigners settling in the subcontinent, and foreign trade finally made a major impact on the coinage, trade and economy of postmodern India. Coins issued by the powers coming from West and Central Asia and then settling down in India reveal the dynastic and political profile of these powers, which is a unique feature of this phase. Coexistence of multiple powers and polities, largely known from their coins, is the hallmark of post-Mauryan India. So it's a very vibrant phase where we find the existence or coexistence of several powers. And as one would expect, that with the collapse of a large empire like the Mauryas, the economy would actually be in a chaotic condition. It's just the opposite. We find proliferation of coinages and a large variety of coins being issued, and here we find that the foreign powers who came and settled in India played a major role, and the numismatic evidences are very, very significant, and they actually introduced several major change in the pattern of coin and currency in the post-Mauryan phase. I hope you have got a broad overview of the post-Mauryan coins and currency system. Thank you so much.